Welcome to the JD Bunkis podcast. Pretty good Toronto sports night. You got a pitcher, an MVP pitcher. An MVP pitcher. If I told you you're going to get Dylan Cease, Shane Bieber was going to opt in for basically free. And then you were going to get an MVP. Cody Ponce. Yeah. 100 years ago, he had a ERA of 6 for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He dominated the KBO. I'm supposed to do Kevin Kiermaier today, and I have already taped the interview. There's nothing that is going to really materially change, so I moved it to tomorrow. Because I texted BNS, and I asked him, like, you're my boy, is there something to this? Like, I know that Cody Ponce is the type of guy who a lot of the cool baseball Twitter people are going to like. Because it's a cool baseball Twitter signing. Who knew about Cody Ponce other than hardcore baseball people who pay attention to these things? Like, I don't have time to know what's going on in the KBO. I will never have time to know what's going on in the KBO. I'm pretty sure there's a lot more offense in KBO than in the Japan League. I'm pretty sure. I'm 90% sure. So these stats are more impressive to me because I'm 90% sure the KBO is a more offensive league. But I texted BNS. I asked him, I'm like, is there enough here? He said, absolutely. So going to have him on later today. I bumped the Kiermaier interview to tomorrow, which is good. There's a lot there. Especially the second half of the interview, the Kiermaier interview. Raptors win. Up and down game. There was a moment where Brandon Ingram rolled his ankle, and I thought we weren't going to see him until the spring. That scared me. There were moments where the Raptors looked like they were going to pull way ahead of the Blazers and just kind of shut it down. Listen, the Blazers are plucky, I would say, but they didn't have Drew Holiday in their lineup. I know the Raps are missing RJ Barrett, but, like, come on. A team like the Blazers misses one, if not their best player, and you're supposed to be able to beat their ass at home. And, yeah, it was an up-and-down game. It really was. I thought Barnes was spectacular. It was one of his, to me, better games of the season. He just kind of gave you everything. He just gave you the full Scotty Barnes experience. They got this Lakers game on Thursday. I've said over and over and over again that I'm really excited for the more difficult portions of the Raptors schedule because you're going to find out a little bit more who they are. But the one thing that I'm really encouraged by is the half-court offense at times sticks. And they're still not a very good three-point shooting team. The percentages are up. They're not that low in overall team percentage, but I'm pretty sure, let me take a quick look here, that they're bottom 5 in three-point attempts, 27th in three-point attempts, making at a decent rate, 36%. But, yeah, there was a moment in that game where the Blazers just decided to zone up, asked the Raptors to shoot, and the threes aren't really falling, and that's how you can lose to a lot of bad teams, is if you can't match them on the three-point shot and they can out just Matthew. But when things got sticky in that game and it kept getting close, and because that kept happening, I liked how the Raptors continued to move the ball, that it still felt like this one was a more collaborative effort. I've pointed to the games where they've needed Ingram. They've needed Ingram to just put the cape on and score them a bunch of baskets down the stretch. But for me, ultimately, the Raptors' formula for success is to feel like a group. And it's why Scotty Barnes needs to feel like the 1A player, and it can't be Brandon Ingram, is because that's his identity of a guy, is getting other people involved. Yes, Brandon Ingram's been a better playmaker this season than I anticipated. I think that he is giving a more serious defensive effort than I expected as well. But that was a Barnes game. And those are the ones that I'm going to enjoy more and take more from. I'm going to talk to Armin a little bit more about that coming up here because there's a few other things from that game that matter to me. But the Leafs, how many times have you been able to, like, the Raptors have been fun, the Blue Jays have been fun. The Jays offseason has been Pretty much nothing but excitement. There's a little consternation about the relief market. Again, I'll talk to BNS about this because some of the better names that kind of fit the Blue Jays are off the board. I saw Buster Olney today put out there that they maybe are in on Edwin Diaz. It's so difficult for me to see the Blue Jays making that business case, but I guess maybe. I guess if this is who they are spending wise, where you know that Dylan Cease money, I'm looking at the luxury tax bill for the Blue Jays, and it's gonna be a real luxury tax bill, especially if they're not done. They could add Kyle Tucker, they could add Bo Bichette, they're going to add relief pitching, so I'm not writing anything off. And I just like when I looked at that luxury bill, I went, all right, we're not even having those conversations. How many times did we have it over even the last couple of years where I've talked to the insiders about what move they needed to make sure they were under the competitive balance tax and blah, 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 blah. Now it's just like a non-issue. I'm sure it is internally. It's not a zero sum. But in terms of like the greater narrative, I haven't heard one insider, haven't had one baseball conversation with a serious person where they've mentioned this. So yeah, like again, the Raptors, they've been enjoyable. They've exceeded expectations. We've enjoyed them. The Blue Jays, heartbreaking. Still can't watch any World Series highlight or anytime I even see a Dodgers clip, anything just cross the timeline. It's an immediate emotional shutdown. Every once in a while, I still get the Dodgers fans in my mentions sending me some kind of message that it hurts. It still hurts. It really does. I thought the Jays were going to win. But the offseason, it's been helpful because the Jays are splashing cash around. And yeah, they went out and got a premier guy. It started with someone opting in, proving the idea that your team and the clubhouse and the facilities and all this stuff mattered. Then you got a premier starter, maybe arguably, by most people's account, the best starting pitcher or the highest upside starting pitcher on the market at a big ticket price. And now you get the cool guy from Korea, who's not Korean, but is cool. The Leafs, there's just been very few days where I've come on here and been any somewhat optimistic. And I'm sticking to what I said, is they've got to show me a lot for the opinion to change. And the bar for me is not postseason, it's championships. It's the window of Auston Matthews, William Nylander, John Tavares, Morgan Riley, Chris Tanev. It's an older team. I want to see them win. I'm over the idea of a first-round playoff loss, but you got to get in to do that. So I guess one step at a time. It's just going to take a lot for me to think that they're a contender. But last night, I will say this. The Panthers are beat up, blah, 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 blah. Panthers, did they give a great performance? No, but you got to give the Leafs credit, too, for playing the way that they did. They got up for that game. But it's one of the first times where I've watched the team and felt like, okay, the forward groups look balanced. I thought Matthews played extremely well, minus the fact that he is just deferring at a rate that I never expected. There were two plays that I didn't clip and put on Leafs Talk last night because I wanted to just have it be a more, positive. I hate doing that, but it's hard not to frame it that way. I didn't want to do something that was a Matthews concern-o-meter thing. Because he played great. He's just not shooting the way that he used to. And I watched Connor Bedard score a goal last night that was gorgeous. And my first thought was, man, oh man, oh man. It's been a while since I watched Auston Matthews have one of those. Just a gorgeous takeover, snipe one underneath the bar, have the shot look like it's a one of one, and the crowd goes nuts and it's all over social media. Like, I don't know when the last time Auston Matthews had a social media goal that we were plastering everywhere. But overall, top line had energy. I thought Nyes looked healthy. The Domi was probably the better version of himself. When you don't notice him making mistakes, then you're happy with Max Domi's game. The third line has now put together a couple of games where they've produced offense. Raw looks healthy and pretty much like the guy that you were promised when they acquired him. And Dakota Joshua and Bobby McMahon, who, by the way, on paper, when I looked at that, I thought, oh, God, aren't these the two guys that you need top 6 players to get the best out of them? Is this really going to work? And shows what I know because this is what's maybe made the two of them look the best lately. And then you've got this fourth line with two guys that really do feel like real checking forwards who come in and give you a different kind of look and feel defensively responsible and then chipped in a goal. And then the blue line, suddenly, with Troy Stecher stepping in and being a minutes muncher, a guy that they grabbed off of waivers who you expected essentially nothing from. Had Troy Stecher come and gone, I wouldn't have been blown away by that. If you would have given me two outcomes, hey, is Troy Stecher going to lead the Maple Leafs in minutes over 2 games and be unanimously popular in Toronto, or is he going to be waived in 2 weeks? Which one of these two things is more likely to be true? I would have obviously taken the wave. This is his 7th team. He's been great for them. Don't know how sustainable it is, but who cares? You got it right now, and you need it right now. And their goaltending's rock solid. You'd be a fool to think anything other than Joe Wool at this point of his career. When he's healthy and he's right, he's one of the best goalies in the NHL. Flat out. Kid can play. Kid's a stud. The only question is, are you going to wear him down? But so far, doesn't look like he's slowing down to me. You saw the stretch of play last year where he was phenomenal. I'm not messing with it. I'm not getting cute with the rest. I'm seeing what he can do. James Mirtle of The Athletic joins me now. What's up, Jamesy? How we doing?
Hey, JD. Yeah, no, it's is a pretty short list of performances that measure up with the one last night. Like maybe the Utah game. But
yeah, but the Utah game is like such a heavy asterisk one where they're coming off the second half of a back-to-back. You got the only good, like, real Michelli game. And they did seem to match up with them with their size, where Utah just was a little overwhelmed by it, I thought. So, yes, but this to me matters a lot more than the Utah game.
Yeah, I mean, just the stakes that are involved, and they're putting together a little streak, and it feels like they're coming out of something right now, and it's big. And even though it's Florida missing 7 or 8 guys, you can only beat who you're playing, right?
Yep.
So that's why tomorrow is interesting, right? Because you're getting a Carolina team that's healthier, that's legitimately a top 5 team in the league, and you've been on a long road trip, and this ends it off. And if they can pull a point out of that game and play well and not get filled in the way that last time they played Carolina, I think that's going to speak volumes about where the Leafs are at.
Totally right. This is I was making this case yesterday. How, listen, I need a month of good play for me to feel like this team is materially different than what I think they are, which is a group that needs a reset. And that ultimately, like at my core, that is my belief. Like they can put these wins together, they can play well, but deep down, the truth inside of me is I think that it would benefit them to move off of a couple of pieces, acquire some assets, and go into next year and hope that they can figure out what is ultimately a better formula for success. That being said, yesterday to me was a little bit of a reminder that you might not get the same opportunity next year in terms of weakness of the conference. Like Florida is going to get guys like Barkov and Kachuk back, right? They're going to get $10 million in cap space because Bobrovsky comes off the books, and you don't know what they're going to do with that. Maybe they can acquire a goaltender, and maybe that ends up being a problem spot for them. But my guess would be it'll be a pretty attractive destination, and given their recent track record with getting people to buy in to deals that are less than market value, you would probably project they're going to do okay with that cap space. Maybe Montreal is a little bit more mature. Maybe the Senators are a little bit more mature. I'm not going to put Detroit in there because I just feel like it's the same thing every year. But whatever. There's just a bunch of teams that could be better next season, and maybe it's not as flat. So I could be talked a little bit out of this. In terms of right now, in terms of trying to make these last 4 games and collecting 3 wins feel legitimate, even if you play Carolina and lose, the process to me is going to be unbelievably important. If you have a game where they kick your ass and they just dominate puck possession and it's 2 full periods of, oh my God, how many shots do the Leafs have? Like, they've had so many of those periods, right, where they get the 3-4 shots. They can't have those against Carolina. Otherwise, it's right back down to where you were before, and you're looking at some of these wins and going, well, now we're evaluating who you won differently. It's the same thing with the Raptors right now. Raptors have reeled off a ton of wins against a lot of bad teams. Their schedule is about to get more difficult. And if they start losing games to quality opponents, that's when you start to look at wins against inferior teams and start to judge them a little bit more critically.
Yeah, we can say 3 wins in 4 games all we want, but the reality is the game in Columbus wasn't very good, and the game against Washington wasn't great either. So it's really 2 good games that they've played, and 2 is not a lot. I mean, it's a pretty short streak, and I don't know if you saw it this morning, but I put out today just how big the mountain is that they have to climb. They're on pace for 85 points right now. It's gonna take at least 95 to make it, even with the East the way that it is. And for them to get to 95 points, they've gotta go I got it right in front of me here. They've got to go 34 and 22 or something equivalent to that.
Mhm.
So they basically got to win 3 of 5 the whole rest of the way. And whether you're playing Carolina or you're on the road or it's a back to back, and the Leafs have tons of back to backs this year with the way the schedule is, they've got to find a way to win these games. And this little stretch that they've had here, this road trip, they need to duplicate this for the whole rest of the season. So, it's I think we're making a lot more out of these 2 good games just because there's been so little. It's been a thin gruel of like what's
Totally.
positive to talk about with this team. So I'm all for positive corner, but it's such a small sample size and such a big sample size of how bad they've been, especially against quality opponents. So all of a sudden tomorrow looms pretty large for them.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Is you have a real chance to have like it's nice to be able to say your 2 best wins were against Florida and Utah, but it would be much nicer to say, hey, they beat a really good Carolina Hurricanes team at the very end of a road trip, and it does feel like a little bit more of a corner turning moment. So one of the things for me is, as I mentioned, all of a sudden the lines felt a little bit more balanced. They looked like a group that was getting more 1 through 4. There's some Nylander stuff that's percolating. I don't know if you have anything on that, but it seems very murky, and I don't know even what to read into it. I got my own little kind of like personal theories, but I think they're a little too hot takey for the show. What do you think of the third line? Are you buying stock in this? Again, 2 games, but are you buying stock?
I mean, on paper, coming into the season, this is what we thought we were going to get in a third line, right? Like we thought there
Yep.
was going to be some combination that was going to be Joshua and Wah and whoever the third guy was, and there was going to be some physicality and some secondary scoring. And it's been kind of confusing that 26 games in, we've barely seen it. So, I was thinking about this and I was talking to people around the league about the way that Joshua's looked and the way that Wah's looked. And I think it's just kind of like new team syndrome a little bit. Joshua had a terrible year last year with the cancer and missing training camp and all of that. And I think for these guys coming into a new team and the new team struggling as badly as the Leafs did and playing as badly as they did defensively, I think it really rocked them. In Wah's case, he's played for a successful organization that hasn't really gone through something like this in a long time in Vegas. He's used to success. He's not used to all of the media questions and all of the struggle and how they've played defensively and all of these things. He's been used to stability. And there's real adversity for him, I think, for the first time in his NHL career. And for Joshua, it's been a long road to where he was a good player for Vancouver. I mean, it's almost you're going back 2 years. And someone pointed out to me that even in that season that Joshua had the big year, he started really slow. He had a similar goal total through 25 games as what he's got right now. So, and I think he's a guy that confidence can come in and out. And Bobby McMahon's the same way. So I think if they can get rolling and feel like they've got something there, you're playing them against secondary competition, they're physical, they can get it up the ice. Troy Stetcher, who I know we're going to talk about, he said after the game that line, when he was out there with McCabe, they just said, here's 3 guys that can skate, that are big. Let's like get it to them in the middle of the ice and they're going to get it deep and we can make something happen. So it's not sexy hockey. It's Berube hockey. And it's just, for some reason, we haven't seen it most of this year, but on paper, this is what they should be.
I will say this though about Raw, he seems kind of comfortable with it. Like the playing style the last couple of games has been great, but even when he's been stepping in front of a camera and had to address the media, there isn't I'm a big body language guy with this stuff. I overdo it, but I see someone who speaks with confidence and doesn't seem too worried whenever there have been the lows.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But I think Joshua is one and McMahon is one
I
where
agree.
you get 3 goals in 20 games and all of a sudden you're questioning everything you do.
Well, you're
And
measured by those results, right? You're measured way more than Nick Waugh is. Waugh is going to be able to kill penalties and win faceoffs and play defensive zone hockey. And so you're going to look at him and say, well, he does other things. With Dakota Joshua and Bobby McMahon, we're basically going to look at the hockey reference page at the end of the year and go, what were your traditional counting numbers? Because that's how we're going to evaluate you.
I actually think getting Scott Lawton back has been huge for this team. Just
Agreed.
the way that he impacts the dressing room and his experience and the person that he is, the players talk about him in a way that, he's not wearing a letter, but he's one of the leaders on this team. And he finally gets that goal, his first point of the season in his 8th game, and you could just see the way the bench reacted and the way that he reacted, and everyone's rooting for this guy. Everyone loves this guy, and we're gonna probably lament that trade for years to come. If they don't end up having success, but he's one of the heart and soul guys that if they're going to get out of this, I think he's going to be a big part of that. And they're playing him down on the 4th line. They're not playing him enough for what I would like to see. And I know, for you and Sammy, the way you guys talk after games, I think he should be a guy that's playing 13, 14 minutes. And, the penalty kill's been way better when he's getting minutes there. And I just feel like those are the kind of players that they need to step up. And again, the other one that they brought a guy in off waivers, and you don't think of this, but Stetcher's been another one of those guys. It's just, he's got a good story. He's been in the league a long time. And I think that the mood has been elevated by having 2 character players like that come in and play well.
Totally agree. In regards to Scott Laughton, yeah, I'd like to try to find more minutes for him, and I think it would behoove them to do so. And yesterday on the broadcast, they mentioned how the Leafs penalty kill has gone through the roof with Joseph Woll's return. That he's made something, I think now, 32 of 33 saves on the PK since his return, which is great. Really great stuff. Obviously, massively impactful. But what has been left out of this is I think the Leafs have killed 14 of 15 penalties since Scott Laughton returned as well. And so if you want to do impactful things, Laughton on the PK has obviously mattered for them. The dressing room stuff is beyond real. And you can tell just the way that he resonates with the fan base, the way that he plays. But yeah, the personality, when they first traded for Scott Laughton, the immediate move, I'm sure you do the same thing, is to try to text former teammates and get a off the record, what's up with this guy? How is this guy? He was unanimously popular. The last guy that was like that for me was TJ Brody, except for everyone said that he is a little more quiet, but that everybody likes him and everybody gets along with him. That was the book on Scott Laughton. All these dudes love him. He is just a dressing room glue guy. People fall in line. People get along with him. He can hang out with anybody on the team. The Stetcher thing, character for sure, but McKee pointed this out. I didn't see this interview, but he mentioned how he's on his 7th team. And for a group that was really looking for desperation, really looking for a right-hand shot, really looking for somebody who could just move the puck and make a play and give them a little bit of positivity to the lineup, it's been unbelievable what Troy Stetcher has done. And I know he's Troy Stetcher. I've seen him play hockey before, but looks like a totally different guy out there than what I'm been accustomed to throughout his career.
Yeah, I mean, he's feeling like his back's against the wall. I think some guys, you go on waivers and there's that uncertainty for 24 hours. Am I going to get claimed?
Yeah.
Am I going to the AHL? Am I going to end up in Europe? Is my career over? And I think for him, it's been very motivating. And I remember when he came in as a young player, undrafted, undersized defenseman. He's a local guy in Vancouver. I watch a ton of the Canucks, obviously, because I'm from out there. That's probably the team I watch the second most next to the Leafs. Mm-hmm. And it was such a feel-good story when he was playing for them. And if you remember back in those years when Stetcher was coming up with Vancouver, we're talking, 6-7 years ago, they didn't have a very good blue line. Tanev was a big piece of it. And that was when Tanev was missing a lot of games due to injury.
Yep. And
every time there was that one year, I think he only played half the season. Vancouver didn't have a lot of depth. On the right side, all of a sudden, Stetcher gets elevated. And if you look at the biggest minute performances that Stetcher's had in his NHL career, there was a big run of those games in Vancouver when they weren't very good, and he was playing 24, 25 minutes. And then there's the last 2 games here in Toronto. So he's done this before. And I asked some of my friends in Vancouver who've been around him, and they're like, they all speak so highly of Stetcher, even though he's a guy that's bounced around, even though he's undersized, even though he has limitations. They just believe in kind of the heart and soul of the player and his ability to step up and fill in key minutes. And I think it also speaks volumes to how poorly the Leafs blue line was playing and the guys that they were using in those minutes, that Stetcher can come in and outplay them so dramatically. He's been so much better than Benoit and Carlo and these guys that are more established and that are getting more money and that haven't bounced around the league the way he has. And whether he can maintain it or not, I don't know. I mean, he's only 31. It's not like he's a guy that's 37 years old that is halfway out the door, but he's what they needed. And they needed someone that could move the puck and that could skate the way that he does. And Berube said after the game, I wasn't that familiar with Stetcher's game. I remember when they picked him up and Berube's only comment was, well, he's a right shot, I guess.
Yeah.
But now the way that Berube's talking about him is glowing. It's like, look at the way he's moving the puck. Look at the way he's walking the line. Look at the way he's opening things up. And he's a believer. And I think the big thing is that you get McCabe back on his left side. He's playing with more confidence. He looks way better. And that pairing is just it's their top pairing right now. And Stetcher has done this before. It's just been a long time. I think it had been 6-7 years since he had played this many minutes in an NHL game.
He just looks different than everything that they've had. Right? Like
he is different.
But that's it. I was all for, and still am all for, the idea of you want to have a lot of trees on your back end, and they wanted more size, but you could make the case that there was a touch of an overcorrection when you've got to go down to the minors, and Philippe Myers is the guy that you're bringing up. And to me, it's just all those things you said are totally appropriate. And yeah, I think that he has outplayed what Brandon Carlo was giving you. He certainly outplayed what Simone Benoit was giving you. And I know Myers was in the lineup again yesterday, but to be able to go from the minutes that you needed Myers to play and searching for him to have a partner to just Troy Stetcher. And to me, the biggest thing that you mentioned is actually his ability to walk the blue line and generate some offense and keep pucks in and make an actual play, make an actual pass, not just filter something soft towards the net or like a hope play. He's a real NHLer. And to watch them go from clearly AHL level play from certain guys to 26 minutes last night? He played a lot.
I think 24 something, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe, almost 25.
Overdid it.
Both the last two games.
Yeah, overdid it by a minute there. But, yeah, it really just shows you more so what they were missing. And, yeah, a lot of credit to him. Negative thing. Power play's 27th, and it's December.
Yeah. What was it last year this time? Do you know? It was pretty bad last year.
No,
too.
but last year...
They just had such a hot second half that
they had a hot second half, but they started to turn it around about a month into the season. And they have never had a cold stretch like this, man, where when has it looked good? There's been a few power plays. They had one the other night. I think it was actually against Washington where the process looked okay and they were moving the puck, but like Mark Savard is trying the 5-forward thing again, and it has not been even close to the same without Mitch Marner. It seems as though they can't really figure out the right personnel group. And to be honest, this is one of the first times where, yeah, last year at this time, the Leafs were 9th in power play. So even with the cold start, they had turned it around by this time of the year to be a top 10 power play unit. Right now, again, 27th, James. That is like borderline unacceptable. And the problem I have is I don't really have a take in terms of what I think they're supposed to do.
Well, I think it goes beyond personnel at this point, right? Like, I think that this has to be a system issue, and they've got to get to moving the puck around a little bit better. And the fact that they're so desperate to put Matthews in the QB role is it's concerning to me on multiple fronts. And I know you said you didn't want to go totally negative, but they never would have ever considered this 2 years ago, putting Matthews at the QB spot. And the reason is that he's supposed to be your weapon that's putting the puck in the net, not the guy that's trying to filter pucks through to be tipped. I mean, I think it speaks volumes to where Matthews' game is at right now and his limitations that they are even doing this. And it also speaks volumes that they don't trust anyone else to potentially do that. And they don't trust Morgan Riley back there. And they're not sure about Ekman-Larsson back there. It's frankly a little bit scary that they're, and it just shows their desperation, really, is what it does. But I think what they need to do is just simplify and get it back to having a power play that's moving the puck a little bit more and being more willing to change who's on that unit as well and change that. If it's not working, you and I have talked about this going back to the beginning of the season when it hasn't been working. Try Tavares on the second unit. Think outside the box a little bit, because get a passer there. I think they're going to have to play a defenseman on the power play, whether it's Ekman-Larsson or Riley, for all their warts and all their weaknesses. We saw why they can't have 5 forwards out there against Florida. I mean, the coaching staff, I'm sure, was licking their chops knowing what was happening and who was going to be out there. And it looked like a tire fire in their own end. They had 4 guys back and they couldn't make a play to get the puck out. So you're going to have to live with the limitations of Riley and Ekman-Larsson, but move around some of the other pieces and play power play 2 more, because you asked when does the power play look good? And I would say a bunch of the time it's been when power play 2 is getting the leftover 30 seconds on a power play and making something happen. That's been the best.
That's consistently, that has been better than power play 1. Power play 1 has been a total momentum killer. And yeah, the Matthews thing is very strange. It just is at this point. Like, I mentioned this before you came on, but I watched Bedard. Did you see the Bedard goal yesterday? Not the shootout one.
Yeah. And I was going to quote tweet it and send it out and say, I remember
Yeah,
when that was Matthews doing that, because it looked
like a Matthews goal.
Bedard patterned his shot and
Yeah.
learned from what Matthews did over the years to shoot like him, to have the deception, to
Yep.
have that curl and drag into the feet, to be able to shoot from in your feet the way that Bedard did. The goalie can't read it and put it top corner. That's Matthews. Like Matthews basically invented that shot. And
Mhm.
other young players have been trying to learn what he did and learn from similar skills coaches. And skills coaches have been breaking down video of what Matthews learned with Daryl Belfry, who used to be the skills coach with the Leafs, and now Bedard can do it and Matthews can't, and it's a huge red flag. It
Yeah.
really is. And again, I come back to, and I don't have intel on this, but I just wonder if Matthews' body just can't do that movement and make that happen the way that he used to. That's what it looks like, because that's why, like, why else wouldn't we have seen it?
At this point, and I brought this up even during the preseason, because he had this beautiful one-timer goal in the preseason, and he hammered one in. And people went, well, there's Matthews. There's a shot. And I went, he's not Ovechkin. Like that, he's not known for the one-timer. It's great to add another tool to the toolbox. But ultimately, the thing that made him the best goal scorer 5-on-5 before last season was that shot. Everybody knows it. And again, if you want to remember what it looks like outside of going to his YouTube page, go look at the Bedard goal from last night and feel the flashback that everyone's going to have looking at that goal. There were two moments last night. One was on the power play where he deferred over to Easton Cowan for a look down, like at the goal line, that I was like, wait, where's the shot? Like, you got a clean look at the net. And another one from the left side where he could have just stepped into it. And in the past, maybe it's not a goal, but it's absolutely as threatening of a chance as the Leafs could generate. And it doesn't seem like teams are respecting it the same way. It doesn't look like he has gone to it in a very long time. People have pointed to the velocity on the shot being quite down, and that's a year-over-year statistic. And at this point, given the way that the Leafs spoke about him, like, you heard the same things that I did. Hey, he's healthy. He's back. He can't wait to show people who he is again. I was thinking, when do you think he's going to break the goals record? Because he's 10 away from breaking it, 9 away from tying. And normally you would say, okay, Matthews is back. That's a lock to happen before Christmas. At this point, I don't think it is.
No, like late January, try and get it in before the Olympic break now at this point. Yeah. I remember when Matthews went and played in Switzerland, his coach over there was Mark Crawford, and I was doing a big profile of him because once the Leafs got the first overall pick, and Mark Crawford said, "You know what he is? He's like Anze Kopitar, but he can shoot like Sakic." And I was like, "No, he can't. No one can do that. That's not a player that exists."
Yeah.
And then he came into the league, and it's like, okay, he's Anze Kopitar, and he can shoot like Sakic.
Better
Like
than
that's kind
Sakic.
of he was like this. He was this like crazy hybrid of one of the best two-way players on earth who could also score 60 plus goals in a season. And I don't know if there's a comparable to what he was at his best. And now I watch him and it's like he's Anze Kopitar.
Mm-hmm.
He's still good. He's still a great two-way center. He's still a handful for the other team's best players to play against. He's still, I would say, a top 25 or 30 player in the league, but he's not a top 3 player in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big problem. And no one around the team or Matthews camp or anyone, no one's talking about it. He's not talking about it, but they don't need to talk about it. We can just see what's happening on the ice.
Here's the
And
thing, man.
it's scary. Like, let me ask you this, JD. Like,
Yeah.
can you think of another star who's had an injury cross season like last year, and it's lingered and it's gone on for a while, and then they've come back to be dominant again? We've had questions like, you remember where like when Ovechkin had his dip and it's like, oh, he's old and he's aging out and he's going to decline. And then he came back again. Crosby had the concussions and came back and was more dominant than ever.
But those ones were different.
I wonder. Yeah, they were.
Like, and again, it's the major difference too in this one is that it really does feel like it's down to one thing. Okay, two, because I guess you want to be able to keep him on the ice, right? You don't want to have a situation, which you do right now. And I would say that's the one where it's more akin to Crosby, where after Crosby had the multiple head injuries, there was a real period of time where you watched him with, holding your breath. Every time there was real significant contact, it was like, oh no, don't hurt Sid. And I have a little bit of that with Matthews now, where if someone's going to hit him or he looks off for even a shift, my brain is going to start to spiral and go, oh no, they're going to need to sit him for 2 weeks. So that's, I guess, a slight comparable. But with Sid, again, he's fine. It's just, could his career be derailed by head trauma? With Matthews, we don't know what it is. And Ovechkin, same thing. He never really lost the shot. It was just like the skating started to dip down, and yeah, he was old. And so we started to project it out and say, well, this is what happens naturally at this point of a career for a guy that has been as physical a player as Ovechkin and who plays as hard as Ovechkin does. With Matthews, the one thing is just that shot. Where is the shot? Why have we not seen more of the willingness to shoot it and just mix it in? Just have one night where all of a sudden Matthews just rips a wrister and beats a goalie clean. And I think that would do a lot for his confidence, for the fan base's confidence, because it says something to me, to your point about how good he still is. I thought last night was arguably his best game of the season. He was very, very good, but he didn't score. And I went, okay, that's a really good Matthews game. What was he doing a lot of last night? Deferring. He was playmaking. He made a lot of plays. He made a good pass up to Nyes. He fed Nick Roy on that 2-on-1, but he was deferring. And ultimately, he's not supposed to be a deferral player. He's supposed to be the guy that finishes it, not sets it up.
It seems like he's trying to reinvent his game on the fly a little bit, and he's so good, and he sees the ice so well, and like I think he could be a good playmaker, but like ideally you don't want that to be the central theme of his game, the central tenet of what makes him a good player.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked last year about him being so good defensively and shutting teams down, and like absolutely he can do that.
Yeah.
And Berube's played him more in the defensive zone, and the system is different too. I mean, there can be a conversation maybe about, is Matthews playing too many defensive minutes, being relied on too heavily by Berube? Is the Berube system not setting him up for the kind of plays that he was getting under Sheldon Keefe? I think those are probably all legitimate concerns. But at the end of the day, he's shooting the puck less. He's not shooting the puck as well, and his shooting percentage is down to, I think it's under 11%. And he's always been a guy that's like 17, 18, 19%. He's been a guy that shot volume, he's always tops in the league, 4.5, 5 shots a game, every game, all season. Almost no one can do that in the NHL. Now he's down closer to 4 shots a game, and he's converting at a much lower rate. And all of those things speak to that he's a diminished player from what he was 2 years ago.
I asked you to do a little digging on the Brandon Carlo situation, because yet another Leafs injury where a guy goes away. You feel like, oh, he's taking steps. And then all of a sudden he had a setback, and now he's going to get, quote, work done. What were you able to find out?
It was something that happened, I was told, a few weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, and they thought it would be something he'd be able to play through, miss a little bit of time and then come back and play. And I don't, honestly, like it's like dealing with Fort Knox or something, trying to get anything and I did ask around, and apparently this is a tree living thing, this is coming from the GM, the way that the injuries are being, it's not Berube, it's not the medical staff. Apparently it's the front office that's decided this. So, I think what it was with, and we're in the position where I think we have to speculate now with these injuries, but I think with Carlo, I think it's a lower body thing. I think it's probably one of the shots that he blocked. If you go back 2-3 weeks ago, I think something happened there. So something that they thought was, I guess, a minor break was more than that, but I don't know that for sure because it's hard to get information. But my guess is it would be one of the many, many shot blocks he had when they were allowing 80, 90 shot attempts a game did some damage to him. And, so it's not like I don't think he'll be out for the season, but he's going to be out for a while.
Yeah. So here's what I would say to the Leafs if they ever asked me, which they won't. You got to stop doing this. You have to stop doing this because the fan base is already frustrated, right? They put together a couple of wins and there's a slight sigh of relief here and an opportunity against Carolina, blah, 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 blah. There's a different level of apathy around the Leafs that I'm sensing that has not existed in years past. They've always been a roller coaster ride emotionally, but the investment has clearly been there. And you see this, I think that it's not a one-size-fits-all conversation, and it's one that we'll have on a different day. But I look at just like the secondary ticket market. And it's not the same for the Leafs right now. I see the engagement numbers on the Leafs. They're not the same right now. I see the conversations that my closest friends, and granted, I'm a millennial, so we're now entering the we've been beaten down by a lot of bad Leafs teams phase. Like I used to look at my dad, for example, the way that he would talk about the Leafs, and it was, he'd seen a lot. He'd seen a lot more hockey than me. And I think even Gen Z is starting to step into this now, where it was only unbridled enthusiasm, and the main hockey that they had been watching was just fun and exciting and young and fast-paced and full of talent. So they couldn't really relate to the pain of being a Leaf fan. But now with, rising costs and competitive viewerships, all these different things, it just feels different with the Leafs. And the way they handle injuries, I know there will be some people who come at me and say, what do you want them to do? You want them to tell them what the injuries are? A lot of teams are secretive in hockey and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but nobody really does seem, first of all, nobody's in the spotlight that Toronto's in. But secondarily, this has now happened so much over the last few seasons. I went over the numbers a couple of days ago on my show, but they're like third in man game loss to injuries over the last 2 seasons. It extends actually beyond Craig Berube into the final year of Sheldon Keefe, where they've had a ton of them. And this lack of transparency with timelines and this over-optimism when guys first get hurt that often turns into something that's lingering. Or this happened last year, right, with Stolars. It's happening again, where they were like, it's something minor, and then it turns out that he's got a pebble in his knee and he's going to be missing time. During a period where there is so much fan frustration, there is so much fan apathy, this is something where for a group that is trying to connect more with its fan base and try to feel like there is more trust between the two, seems like a bit of a simple solve for me to try to be a little bit more transparent with this stuff and not try to be Fort Knox and that you're above it. And I get protecting players, but this isn't the NHL playoffs. You're not asking guys to grind through injuries. I think you got to open up the books on the ones when guys are going to be missing significant time like Carlo is or like Stolars is right now.
Well, they're creating an environment where it's such a big media environment. Everyone's going to start digging through their trash cans and
that's
looking
it.
for.
Yeah, you don't want that.
That's what's going to happen. And, and then there's going to be like people like you and I speculating and, guessing what it is and how it happened and how long it's going to be, because in the absence of information, there's a vacuum that's created, and it's going to create an environment that's worse than if they were just a little bit more transparent. And I think like, it was really stark when they played Montreal the other day, and Montreal, the coach comes to the podium and starts listing off the injuries and the timeline and what's going on. And then it's the complete opposite for Toronto. I mean, it's the same. It's a huge media market, and it's a team with expectations. And so what's the difference?
The thing is, too, is you end the conversation. If you're just like, this is what Brendan Carlo had, this is how long he's going to be out. It's going to be the X amount of time where, like, optimistic timeline, pessimistic timeline. Who's talking about it? Like, it goes away immediately. And instead, you leaving it this way, people start to keep wanting to, as you said, dig through the trash cans and keep the conversation going. I think it's a piss poor strategy, if I'm being honest. Last thing, do you think the Olympics are officially in danger of happening for NHLers?
No. I mean, this seems to happen a lot with international play and with the Olympics.
I've never heard of smaller ice and arena.
I mean, I think the Olympics are in danger of happening on a bigger ice sheet.
Yeah,
but it's 3 feet shorter. So I'm trying to think, like, as a beer league player, like, does that matter? Probably not for me, but for these guys, it's 3 feet out of 200 feet coming off the sheet. Dr. Seuss there. I mean, I think it's going to matter for them because you're going to reach the end of the rink. And where's that 3 feet coming from? Like, is the blue line getting moved in? Is the neutral zone smaller?
The idea that you thought first, how does it affect me as a beer league player, is got to be one of the most insane answers we've ever had on this show.
I'm just thinking like spatial awareness.
The best players on earth are going to be playing on this surface.
No, I know, but I can't put myself in their shoes and see the way that they're going to interpret that. Mm-hmm. So the question, like, do you have a smaller neutral zone? Do you have a smaller offensive zone? Mm-hmm. How is that going to impact how many offsides there are, or how you're going to be able to work on the power play? And these are big, fast, elite players. Mm-hmm. I've always been a proponent of, I wish NHL buildings had different sizes. Like, I wish we went back to the old days when, Boston would have the smaller ice surface and you could build your team around having that. And allow some teams to have some variability. So maybe it's not the end of the world. I think the thing you worry about is, how is it going to impact play? And are there going to be more injuries? I mean, that's what you don't want to see in a tournament like this.
Well, that's it. That's the part of it that I'm nervous about, is that it seems like, a cluster. And the NHL doesn't want to be there. Like this isn't something that they're gung-ho for. We've had Gary for years talk about how little he thinks the Olympics matters in terms of the grand scheme of things for hockey, despite evidence of things like the Four Nations and the buildup for this. But
The owners hate shutting down the season. They absolutely
of course they
hate
do,
it.
and they don't like having the condensed schedule, and they don't like giving up their players for free. They don't like the injury risk. Of course, there's no upside really for them. They don't care about like the long term health of the sport in most cases. But this one, I'm nervous. I'm a little nervous about this. I need an update that says we're good to go before I start to feel as though it's a certainty that guys are there at this point. I'm at least putting a percentage that it's not happening.
A friend of mine who's of Italian heritage said, "Now you're seeing the infrastructure issues that we have over there," and it was. I think that's right. But Olympics often come down to the wire, and like Sochi, there was all this talk about how much of it was gonna be a mess, and then everyone went over there, and it was like it was weird, but it was fine. Like they were able to play the game, so I think they'll get it figured out. There's so much money at stake, and there's it's going to be one of the marquee sports. They're going to find a way. If they got to have people working through the night or whatever, they're going to get it done.
Okay. James Mirtle of The Athletic. Thanks for joining me, buddy. I'll see you next week.
Thanks, JD.
See you, pal. All right. Subscribe to this podcast. Leave 5 stars. Really helps the show. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a thumbs up. You can leave a comment. Reach out anytime at JD Bunkis on Twitter and Instagram. Quick break. Come back, and I want to talk about the Raptors. Raptors squeaked by the Blazers last night. I wish I was giving them more time today, but again, the Blue Jays grabbed Cody Ponce. So I got to talk to Ben Nicholson-Smith about what that means and where they go from here, and relief market, latest on Tucker and Bo, and go on down the line. And yeah, Leafs have not had very many positive moments. So they got the billing. Raps, like I said off the top, up and down game. Moments where I went, this is great. And then a lot where I went, oh, why are you letting the Portland Trailblazers come back on you this way? Some bad defense earlier in this game. Basically, the Raptors did not commit to it. And that was basically I'm not saying anything that other people haven't thought of, I'm sure. But I'm not doing as much Raptors content as, say, the show that's after me with Bonner and Blake. They have got to be, and it's going to be curious if they can handle this workload. But they've got to be the team that locks in defensively, because if they don't get stops and it becomes half court versus half court, teams like the Portland Trailblazers can hang with them, because the Raptors do not have a wide or a deep abundance of shooters. And yes, the last night was encouraging in the half court because of when it got late and they needed baskets, they were moving the basketball. But ultimately, they're a transition team. They get stops and they run the ball down your throat, and quickly gets out in space and he starts knocking down that jump shot. Barnes is handling it and he's finding open shooters or getting to the basket. That's when the Raptors look great. And by the way, Armin's here. I kind of been feeling the RJ Barrett loss throughout this. I think people kind of overlook that because they have talent on the wing and it gives you an opportunity to see some of the younger guys, but he shelters you from, like, it's a pretty steep drop off going from RJ Barrett to Jacoby Walter at this phase of his career. I know he had the 14-point game the other night, but this is my thing with the Raptors now. One is the stops thing that I mentioned, and being a half-court team versus being a fast-break team. The shooting stuff, I think, was obvious from the outset. But to me, this season, a lot of it is going to come down to, and this, obviously it's Barnes' one. Obviously it's Ingram's fit. Obviously it's health. Obviously it's Quickly's emergence. But one of the underlying stories to me from this game that it pointed out was they've got Jacoby Walter, Ochai Agbaji, and Grady Dick. And they need one of those three guys to really step up and be just a regular rotation minutes guy that you feel good about. And yesterday, Grady gave them good minutes. He was solid. The other two combined for, I think, 2 of 10 from the field. Jacoby was not good, really not good. And Ochai came in and actually made a play early and then gone. But then Grady was making shots. And it feels like these three guys are competing for a spot. I don't think they're going to get rid of Jacoby Walter unless it's in a trade where he's being thrown in for a significant player. hard to envision Grady Dick still, even though it hasn't been a good start to the season. Ochai's always been the guy because of the money. But yeah, how did you feel about that game last night?
Well, I was looking at what Darko said earlier, and he was saying RJ still hasn't participated in any team activities. He's recovering and improving.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have a stretch where we play Boston twice, New York,
Lakers.
Lakers.
New York sucks, by the way. Raps got to beat them. Like, I watched some of that game against the Celtics yesterday because I was curious, and
They're so topsy-turvy, but I still have like the Knicks probably winning the East just because how weak it is. And
over the Cavs, over the Raps.
I
over
do
the
have them over
Pistons.
the Cavs. Raps at this point, I mean, are obviously drawing closer, but I think it's got to be Jacoby for now, JD, to be honest, like watching the game. I don't think the missed shots is a big deal. I mean, Grady had 6 for 8 yesterday, and it looked all good, and he makes a couple of defensive plays. It looks awesome, but
No, Grady's not going to make defensive plays. It's just
like
that's not.
for the next 2 weeks, I think Jacoby, this is a big chance for him, honestly. And like Jamal Shed, you don't want to start overusing him either. Like towards the end of the game, he made some huge winning plays, drew a charge, had that assist to Brandon Ingram. But I feel like once you like ask him to step up his role a little more, it might start getting a little.
What I don't like is when he gets the ball late in the shot clock. I like him early clock where he gets to be decisive. What was late? Do you see that Robert Williams block on him? That was like, dude, that's where you looked 5 feet tall.
Yeah.
And that's a 7-footer that you're trying to go at. Yeah, I like Shed. I don't think that his role is basically up for dispute. He's going to be an important player on this team. I actually really like Murray Boyles. It just, the body, the size, the defense, him in a dunker spot, all of it works for me. I'm not expecting too much from him. It's a step-by-step case where, hey, you got a long runway, kid, but the NBA frame and the way he sees the floor, the way that he moves off the ball, there's just a lot to like there. But, yeah, I'm with you that it's going to be a big stretch for Jacoby Walter in terms of, like, what kind of a role he can carve out for this team. But I think it's a big stretch for all three of those guys to say, like, who is the most reliable of those three for this team as that wing player that they desperately need? Obviously, Grady is the best shooter of the group, and they desperately need three-point shooting, but he's the biggest liability defensively and does the fewest other things for them. So can the shooting and can the offense be, if he's that guy last night, okay, cool. That's fine. If you're a deadly offensive weapon that you can rely on every night, cool. Ochai feels like he's just flat out playing for staying on the Raptors, and maybe he does need to change the scenery, but yeah, it's coming down to those three guys for me. Anyway, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and have a chat with our good buddy, Ben Nicholson-Smith. That's next. Oh, yeah, it's Spotify Rap Day. By the way, I have something on this that hurt my feelings badly. And not that I shouldn't have known this, but they threw in a listening age. Yeah. Yeah, they did. And I think everybody wants to be a little cool with their music, right? Who doesn't think that their music is cool? Especially now we live in the era of everybody's got their catered little tastes. Everyone's curated. Micro audiences, blah, blah, blah. Oh, are you listening to this cool new podcast? Ooh. Oh, have you seen this show? Like for me, like I'll watch the international shows. Like, oh yeah, there's a great new Nordic murder mystery show. Have you seen? Department Q came out, and I went, yeah, I've already seen the ones from Norway. All right, I've been on that. I didn't need them to anglicize it with the Scottish version. I'm hip. I'm cool. I got my micro audiences, and it's the same with music. Everybody wants their music to be cool. That's why people get anxiety when they get handed the aux cord under pressure, and that's why it takes you got to be solid to take the aux cord and want the aux cord. You know, you get on the party bus, you're there, and that person wants to sit up front. You're in the Uber and it's packed, and you're going out somewhere, and that person says, "Give me the rock." You need the "Give me the rock" person in the crew. You don't want the person who's like, and then they just throw on like an old 50 Cent song. Let's do that. I got slapped with, I looked at my listening age 40. Crusher, true crusher. Just way too much nostalgia for me this season, even though all my most listened to albums were new. So I still throw on the classics, and my workouts get me, bro. My workouts get me because I always go back to the old stuff during the workouts. I'm never listening to new music when I'm working out. That's a brag. That's basically me telling you guys, like, working out all the time, No big deal. No big deal. Just crush the gym. So hit me with your Spotify raps. Tag me in it if the show is the most listened to. That's great. I always appreciate that stuff. I love seeing it at JD Bunkis on Instagram. Ben Nicholson-Smith is a senior Jays writer and reporter for Sportsnet. He also does At the Letters. And I did the move yesterday. I texted you. I said, yo, is there enough here? And you said, absolutely. So let's get into it, buddy. Ponce, the Korean Baseball League MVP, gets a 3-year deal. So I got to admit, my initial gut reaction, I texted it to you. I'll just tell the truth to the audience. I went, is this new Yariel?
I don't think it will be.
Okay, that's good. That's a good
I
start.
don't think it will
Hey!
be. Yeah. So I think that obviously we're going to have to see how it translates. But to strike out 36% of hitters in the KBO, like, it's tough to do. And I was just looking this up before while I was listening to your Spotify Wrapped info, which is very fascinating, by the way. But I think Eric Lauer, when he was in Korea in 2024, he struck out 25% of hitters.
Okay.
So then you look at a guy who's striking out 36% of hitters. Lauer was good when he came over. It's not like he was overmatched. So this indicates to me that Cody Ponce can fall off. He doesn't have to be nearly as dominant. He was the MVP in Korea this year. He doesn't have to be that good to be a very useful pitcher for the Jays.
Okay, so the difference with Lauer, though, right, is that he had a track record in the majors. He was good for the Brewers for 2 seasons, like 2 seasons with a sub-4 ERA. So when he's coming back from Korea, you're thinking, all right, maybe he worked through some of the kinks, because when he left the major leagues, he became just like flat out unplayable. Ponce's track record in the majors is not good, but it's also from 100 years ago now, which is 2021. So it's 55 innings pitched, and I think the ERA is just a tick under 6. The big thing that I was reading, and because, listen, man, I've watched now maybe 2.5 minutes of his highlights, and I've read the same Twitter threads that other people have read about, hey, this guy added this changeup. The changeup has drastically changed what he's done. Hey, he's added the velocity. But when, like, you look at the stuff and you read the information, the actual data about what he's able to throw, how this is going to translate into something that is, materially different from what he was at the major league level.
I think velocity is everything. And he's sitting 94 to 97 now. I mean, that's a big deal. We've seen that even, you mentioned Yariel. Yariel Rodriguez is a lot more effective when he's at 97, 98 than when he's at 93. And the same goes for anyone. I mean, the same conversation, we could have that about Jose Barrios. Why is he not as effective? Why is his trade value probably not anywhere near where it would have been? He's throwing 92 from the right side. So velocity really is everything. And it doesn't really matter what he was doing in 2021. Trey Savage was probably a sophomore in high school at that point. Like, a lot changes in that 4 or 5 year period. So I think they're in a good period, or they're in a good position here where they have this guy who was absolutely dominant against professional hitters. They're not paying him like an ace. They're paying him kind of not even like a number 5. They're paying him like a swing reliever. They're paying him like Yariel. And there is upside to be a starting pitcher on this team, depending on how some things shake out in spring training. I'm sure they'll stretch him out and then just see how the spring unfolds. But this is a guy, like, I won't be surprised at all if he's out there on April the 15th throwing 5 1/3, allowing a couple runs, striking out 6 hitters, like being a very useful major league starting pitcher.
So, by the way, another hit for you. I don't think you're getting credit, and you're not a guy who lavishes himself in praise. VNS on a heater when it comes to what's been going on with the Blue Jays, and basically alluded. You were the first guy that put this guy's name out there. I don't know how many times you came on this show and you would just sort of throw his name out and you would go, hey, go out there and add a Cody Ponce. And I would go, shut up. Tell me about Chris Bassett. Tell me about the things that I know about. But in terms of what the Jays were going to prioritize, mentioning Cody Ponce and over again, kind of just throwing his name under the radar. You wrote an article yesterday before this thing came out about the case for adding more pitching, and he was one of the highlight pieces of this. So clearly there was some good buzz about the Jays really feeling like there's a lot to this guy because they were telegraphing some of this to you.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know if I would use those exact words, but I was picking up on some signals. Yeah. And yeah, Cody Ponce is someone that the Jays have liked for a while. Where, he was really having this breakout season in the KBO all year. So as soon as this starts happening, this goes back to the Blue Jays and their presence in the Pacific Rim. It's how they got Lauer. It's, it didn't work out on Roki Sasaki, for example, or Yamamoto, but they've been on all the big names coming over. Even Imai, that's probably not a fit anymore, but they did their diligence on him. They were on him. They have the relationships in place and the knowledge of that market to be able to move if they need to. And it's going to vary each offseason depending on whether Dylan Cease says yes to your offer, depending on what your finances are. But they were in a position where, okay, they had done their background on Cody Ponce. They knew exactly who he was. They had a pretty good sense of how he would translate to the major leagues, understanding that there's no certainty there. And then they knew they liked him. So they add to the rotation this way. And yeah, I'm really happy that it worked out this way, because personally, I never want to lead Jays fans astray. I never want to put names out there that are just like names for the sake of names. So yeah, in this case, it was definitely something that I had heard, and it ended up happening.
Yeah. So a couple more things on him. One is just, yeah, dude, he had over 250 strikeouts and an ERA under 2 in the KBO. It's a professional baseball league. That's pretty damn encouraging stuff. And he's setting records there. And I didn't even look this up during the break, but this isn't the Japanese league where nobody hits, right? Like, guys hit in the Korean baseball league. This is a far more offensive league than Japan, right? I'm not crazy thinking that.
Oh no, you see some big like slugger numbers coming over. Yeah, absolutely.
So this is more encouraging being in this league than it is from having a Japanese league number.
I think they're both
comparable.
They're both real leagues.
Yeah.
Like, these are real leagues that are probably above the caliber of AAA.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, I mean, if you were in AAA and you were throwing these numbers, then people would be pretty confident in who you are. So that's actually a really great way of framing it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, mind you, he's 31.
Yeah.
So, you don't see a ton of 31-year-olds in AAA dominating, because if they're that good, they're in the major leagues. So you just don't see this kind of pitcher in the minors. He is a major league pitcher. This is why he got $30 million over 3 years. If the Jays weren't going to go to 30, probably someone else would have been at 25 or close, or maybe at 30. We don't know the details yet, but this was a pitcher who was in demand. He became available to sign Monday. He had a deal Tuesday. That's a dude who had a lot of interest.
How important is Hyun-Jin Ryu in this?
I honestly don't know. My guess is not very.
Okay.
I don't want to take anything away from Hyun-Jin Ryu.
But he is like a mega rock star over there. So the idea that he's like scouting and spending a lot of times working with the team, I was curious about. But yeah, just like him, Lauer, and now this, and the fact that he was teammates with him, like, there is a connection.
Well, there is. And the connection I would actually point to is the former interpreter of Hyun-Jin Ryu, who is now a scout for the Blue Jays. So that individual is extremely important when it comes to just understanding the market and being that liaison, being that link. Ryu himself, I saw the clip of Ponce, in the Ryu jersey. So it's probably not zero, but I think more important is the scouting relationship that they've established with Ryu's former interpreter.
Okay. So when you, like, I'm just trying to get a little bit more insight too into the Jays' presence in the Pacific Rim, because to me, the stuff that I see is like, the Jays took out a big billboard, even though it was illegal in Japan. Right. And you're like, okay, the hell does that mean? And I'm sure there were guys in Japan watching the World Series and they see the Blue Jays, so there's some market value to something like that. But when you're talking about how they end up, like, it's one thing to scout these guys, right? But a lot of the league is excited about Ponce. And you said it. This wasn't just a one-team demand. This isn't the Blue Jays going out and saying, well, this is our guy and no one else really knows about him. It's 2025. You're not finding dudes, although there was one guy, I can't remember who it was, where they found him like in a parking lot at night. I can't remember who that was. But he wasn't supposed to be the pitcher that they went to go see, and then somebody showed up at a parking lot and threw like 96, and they ended up signing him. But for the most part, those stories don't really exist. The pitchers who have value are known to the entire league, but the Blue Jays ended up getting this thing done. Is this just an issue of, okay, they were more comfortable giving this guy term when other teams weren't? Or is this that they've actually become an attractive destination with what they're able to do with their pitchers, the facilities, the city? Like, what are the Blue Jays selling to these guys that is making it materially different?
And I think it's almost 2 conversations, or maybe 3 conversations, depending on the player's country of origin. Because Cody Ponce, obviously American, drafted in the second round 10 years ago. So he knows who the Toronto Blue Jays are. It's a bit less about, cultural adjustments. to some small extent there could be, but essentially he grew up in North America. So there's less of a sales pitch that has to be made there. There are fewer cultural hurdles that have to be overcome and kind of navigated. So in his case, it's probably more about winning, which the Jays now are obviously in a good position to sell. And then it's also where I think their inroads make a difference is they probably have a higher degree of confidence about what works translating from the KBO to Major League Baseball than other teams. If you take a team like, let's say, the Rockies that wouldn't have those kind of resources, they might just be guessing. Like, they might not really have a clear sense as to the ingredients that allow for a pitcher to succeed in one place and then translate to another. So I think the Jays have that. And then, of course, when you're talking about players who are literally from Korea or from Japan, then what the Blue Jays have done is really kind of built the relationships to the point that they can handle the nuance that comes with those kind of cultural conversations and just do it really smoothly. They're not going to be as awkward. They're not going to put their foot in their mouth in the same way that, I would if I was going over there and trying to talk to a Japanese player and not knowing the cultural norms.
So he's in demand, and he just had a ton of success as a starting pitcher. The Blue Jays sign him, and it's not very clear that he is going to be a starter because they are stacked at that position. And I think you even already mentioned the idea of him being in that swingman role and that you wouldn't be surprised if he's delivering 5 2/3. Like, listen, man, injuries happen, so you could get an opportunity. But it is a little curious to me that someone who had a market and who is a starting pitcher wouldn't choose a destination if the money was close, even with some of the stuff that you're mentioning, when they would be given a guaranteed opportunity to be a starting pitcher. So what are you reading into that, if anything? Because I am.
I read into it that he has gotten a guaranteed opportunity to be a starting pitcher from the Toronto Blue Jays.
Okay. Yeah, but
I think he's a starter.
Okay, but that means, let's go through it. They have Trey Savage. Well, I don't need to say the guys. They already have 5 starting pitchers. And if you're saying
6 now, 7.
But that's it, is that, sure, they have 8. You did a tweet yesterday, right? And you didn't even throw Bowden Francis's name in there. So I was like, oh, that's maybe a little something. Are they trading Bowden Francis? I'm not a
no shade at Bowden Francis. That was not my intent.
All I'm saying is that they're deep with guys who normally were supposed to compete. And a year from now, if you're Ponce, you're looking at this and saying, well, I would have a pretty clear opportunity to be in the rotation in a year when money comes off the books and maybe Bieber leaves, maybe Gossman's, who knows? But in the immediate future, if you're saying that he's going to be starting games, I don't think that they're going to have a full season of a 6-man rotation. Yeah, like there's going to be opportunities where maybe they give a guy a blow and they throw someone like Ponce in there. But is that what you're saying? Like he's going to get a few starts here and there? Or is this kind of, again, telegraphing that another move's coming?
So we haven't heard from Ross Atkins on Dylan Cease or on Cody Ponce yet.
Yeah.
So this is my interpretation of things, okay? And we'll see what they say and how they behave. My prediction would be that when you have a guy who is just the MVP in Korea, you're not going to like shorten him up in spring training. You're going to take him to spring training and you're going to say, all right, we're ramping you up with our starting pitchers. You are, maybe not guaranteed a job, but you're going to be starting games for us in spring. You're going to go 45 pitches, 60 pitches, 75, the normal buildup that everyone does. Then if there's a reason to change that at some point based on health or performance, whatever the case, you change it. But typically, as you know, someone's going to get hurt or someone's going to underperform. I mean, again, like Barrios, he, I think, has to show up with something to prove. And he's done this before. He can prove himself again. But I think there is an element of him having to prove something. Lauer, we know, can go to the bullpen. Francis has options. He can go to the minors. Savage has options. I mean, I'm not predicting that, but there are different ways that you can navigate this thing. And that's even if everyone's healthy. So I would expect that Cody Ponce is going to get every opportunity to start and begin the season with the Blue Jays in their starting rotation.
So what happens if Barrios doesn't prove himself?
Then you have some tough decisions to make. I mean, I think it would depend on like what form that takes. Would he be in the bullpen? Would he be on the injured list, recuperating somewhere? I don't know. But we're a long way from that point. I think it was not a good year, and it was not the finish that anyone wanted for Jose Barrios, but he has rebounded before. So even though this is a low point for him and for his trade value, I'm not going to say that it could never happen again.
Sure, but they're obviously taking calls on him. Like if you call the Jays today and you say, "Hey, we want Barrios," they're not like, "No way, we believe in him. He's bouncing back. He's so important to our team." But do you actually get the sense this shifts them to actively shopping him?
I think it's difficult to actively shop a player who's in the position that Barrios is, where he's owed $67 million, I think, over the next 3 years. Like, those conversations probably aren't going to have a lot of traction unless you're taking someone's contract back that is kind of comparable on that front.
Or eating money.
It's eating a lot of it, probably. It's just going to be a short conversation. I think that would be the understanding. So the Jays in a position as a big market team, sometimes this is the advantage of having that money, where you go, all right, we are going to simply roll in with all these starting pitchers, hope for the best, work with all of them, keep that positive vibe going, hope that they can achieve their potential, and then end of spring training, you're going to have a tough decision to make. Someone's going to be disappointed. You figure it out then. But I think going into spring, they're just going to, they're coming off a World Series, obviously. They're going to be really optimistic, and they're just going to stretch a bunch of guys out and kind of see where that 6-7 week period leaves them.
Yeah, well, to Cole's note what we're saying here in a bit of a roundabout way and a little directly is they're going to have a competition for that fifth starter spot, and Jose Barrios, the guy who entered the season as the opening day starter, is not guaranteed a spot.
I think that's probably a fair read. Yeah. I think that guaranteed spots go to Cease, Gosman, Bieber. That's probably about it.
Not Savage?
Savage.
Yeah. I was like,
yeah, I think he was,
Yeah.
yeah. As long as Savage is healthy, but I wonder how they frame that. It's going to be hard to see Trey Savage not in there, but even then, beyond that, I don't think that Cody Ponce has a guaranteed job. I just think that when the season starts, he's going to be in the rotation.
Yeah, just again, this is just me, total outsider, literally zero information. It's the first thing I thought of when this guy signed, given that there was a market and that he is a starting pitcher, that he's not coming here unless he feels pretty confident that he's going to be able to get that spot, man. That if they went, well, you could, and you're competing, and it's your swingman role, and maybe somebody gets hurt, like that pitch, that's just not it. The maybe somebody gets hurt pitch doesn't feel quite the same as we're pretty confident you could end up being the fifth starter pitch.
Oh, even if it's just you're in our rotation. Maybe he does have a guarantee. I'm not sure. This deal just happened last night, so still kind of gathering. But I agree with your reasoning there. You're going to give him every opportunity after being the literal MVP of Korea and striking out 252 hitters with a sub-2 ERA. You're not going to shorten him up and say, all right, you're going to be working alongside Mason Fluharty in low leverage. You're going to give him a chance, every chance, to prove that he can start at this level. So, and it's a great, it's the ultimate baseball cliche, but it is a great problem to have, because set the money aside. Do you want Jose Barrios in your organization as an option? Yeah, you want him. You probably don't want him at this price tag, but you want him in the organization. He is worth a 40-man roster spot, to say the least, to have him around as a contingency, an option, and he might be there right alongside Ponce when the season begins.
Here's what I would say. This is exactly where you want to be from a fan base standpoint, a franchise standpoint. It reminds me of the Red Sox when they signed Pablo Sandoval, and immediately he doesn't work out, right? He's a total bust. Complete, and his most famous Red Sox memories are snapping belts, right? What happened? They just went out and spent money right away. They acted as though that contract wasn't even on the books, and it's been a little while since we've seen that version of the Red Sox, but that's the confidence that they instilled in their fan base at the time. We can sign a bad deal, and it doesn't cripple the rest of the stuff that we're doing. We're still going to be aggressive. We're still going to sign other free agents. It's not going to affect our on-field plans for the following year in a materially different way. And that's actually just about as encouraging of anything if you're a Blue Jays fan right now, that okay, they miss on Santander. Guess what? Next offseason, they'll try to replace him. If they missed on Jose Barrios, look at this. They're already trying to essentially replace him, and they're not overly concerned about what the money is. I'm sure they are. No one wants to pay that competitive balance tax. GMs are feeling pressure of not just throwing money good after bad, but ultimately I'm saying that is true big boy stuff. That's an actual different echelon of spending, is when you don't have to say, well, we got to make room for Barrios because we're spending this much money. We got to make room for Santander because we're spending this much money.
Exactly. It is big boy stuff. And I
Yeah.
think that pitching is the perfect place to do that, because on the position player side, it can get clunky with DHs. And the current Red Sox are dealing with that now with Yoshida. I mean, maybe they're ready to add Schwarber or Alonso anyways. The Jays feel that clunkiness with Santander a little bit because it probably takes them out of the Schwarber market. They don't rule anything out, but it's not as clean of a fit. But with pitching, you just add and add and add. It's like the Dodgers, right? You think about the LA Dodgers and the number of starting pitchers that they have. On paper, Emmett Sheehan is their 6th, but we all know Emmett Sheehan is going to pitch extensively in the major leagues next year. It's just Snell's going to be hurt at a certain point. Glasnow is going to be hurt. So applied to the Blue Jays, I think Jose Barrios is going to have plenty of chances to start games for this team. And I think that the same is true for Cody Ponce, probably even true for Eric Lauer. It might be true for Bowden Francis or Ricky Tiedemann. I mean, they are going to need all of these guys to get back to the postseason.
So is this the death knell, though, in the return of Chris Bassett or Max Scherzer? Scherzer felt already like he was a goner, but this feels now like no more Bassett, which is kind of crushing for me.
Yeah, I know you're a big Bassett guy. Yeah. And how could you not be? I mean, these guys, the competitiveness that they brought, I was talking about it with Arden the other day. Like, these guys are just on a different level when it comes to how competitive they are and just like how insane they are when it comes to their preparation and just on the field. I mean, it was so fun to watch. But yeah, on paper, it's not as clean of a fit. They are going to have better opportunities elsewhere. And so I would anticipate that they sign elsewhere. And the same goes for other starting pitchers. I mean, the Jays had interest in Michael King. This was post-Cease, they had interest in Michael King. They were active on the trade market as well. So Imai was someone they did a lot of background work on. All those guys, any starting pitcher, it's the opportunity just isn't there at this point. So I would not expect the Jays to be in any of those markets.
I understand getting younger and going to more velocity and going to more upside. And when you're signing Dylan Cease, right, you sign Dylan Cease over bringing in Chris Bassett. And if they're high on this guy, you got to trust them that they believe that this is the direction to be taking. And I had a conversation with Jim Bowden a couple of weeks ago where he mentioned exactly this. Like, nope, you want to get younger and you want to get more velocity. You want to get more certainty over the next couple of years. Bassett and Scherzer were great for you, but it's probably time to turn the page. And it feels callous to fans who got hyper invested in these guys and who love these guys. But I will say, I keep thinking about Daryl Morey in this situation, where Morey had spoken at Sloan conferences before and talked many times about how the one thing that he overlooked with some of those Rocket teams was chemistry and how much that actually plays into team sports. And baseball, more than any other, is a mathematical equation. So when you're saying, well, we're adding this pitcher, he's adding this war, he's adding this thing, I understand this. There's a great case for this. I will admit there's a bit of a concern for me. I'm not saying the Blue Jays clubhouse is going to fall apart. I get it. They're a tight-knit group full of awesome guys. I know what Ernie Clement is. I know what Davis Schneider is. I just talked to Kevin Kiermaier yesterday. I'm running the interview tomorrow. The way that he talks about these dudes, it's glowing terms. They have other guys who probably don't get the dog reputation because they are in the shadow of Scherzer and Bassett, who are just, like you said, a different degree of this, right? Like, you know who's a dog? Dalton Varsho. He's not leaving anything on the table. That guy is a hardcore competitor. You know who's a dog? Kevin Gossman. Like, that guy cares deeply. He's not the psycho level like Chris Bassett and Max Scherzer, but they have hyper-competitive guys. George Springer, same thing. If they bring back Bo Bichette, same thing. I'm not concerned that...
Vladdy.
Correct. I'm not concerned that these guys are not going to be able to replicate a feeling of harmonious, gets along, play for the guy beside you clubhouse. But I do have fears about removing two guys that felt that consequential to the identity of the pitching staff and who were able to kind of keep everything in line, keep everything in perspective, but also had that reputation where when they speak, it matters. And yeah, I really hope the outcome here is that they trade Jose Barrios and they find a way to bring back Chris Bassett. It feels like such a moonshot at this point. But yeah, when a guy like Shai comes on and he says Chris Bassett was the guts of the team, that matters to me. And when I spoke to every single guy around the team and they mentioned how important Chris Bassett was, and then to see him in that relief role, and yeah, I'm going to miss him if he's gone. I'm going to really miss him if he's gone.
And if he goes and then comes back, I'm sure he'll get a nice tribute on the Rogers Center Jumbotron, and that's the way it should be. I think it's so interesting because with these things, you always get to that chicken and egg question of like winning and culture. Totally. And I think that Bassett and Scherzer, they could be playing 10 years from now in a, softball game at their kids' school, and they would bring that intensity to everything. They would be waving runners around as the third base coach, like full intent. I'm not even joking when I say this. Like,
I agree.
They would be like legitimately like, get home now. Like they are not messing around when it comes to this stuff. And I love it. It's great. But at a certain point, like, you have to put the best team on the field. And Scherzer and Bassett could have been a part of that. They're still good pitchers. We saw that a couple months ago. But if the Jays win, that's going to bring out the best in guys.
Yeah, of course.
If you have a good roster, that is going to, like, Bichette mentally, these guys were in such good places mentally as the season wore on. Like, Bo was on the sidelines, but he was like cheering his team on, doing everything he could to get back. Like, they were in such good headspaces, and it does connect to winning. It's harder to be in a good headspace if your team is losing every night. If they're getting just destroyed on the field, that takes a toll. Players hate it. They're used to winning. They've been good their whole lives. They hate losing. I mean, this is the most obvious thing, but the culture gets bad when a team loses, and that applies to any group of players, including one that's as likable as this group. So you got to make sure you're winning, and then the culture will connect to that as you proceed.
Yeah. You ever read MJ competitor stories?
I mean, I've seen the documentary.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like there's a really great write-up of him by Wright Thompson when MJ turned 50 years old. And some of the stuff about him was like, if you're playing poker against Michael Jordan, he won't let you stop playing poker until he wins. If you're playing pool against Michael Jordan, he won't go to sleep until he starts to win. If you're playing ping pong against Michael Jordan, he won't stop until you let him win. And that's the thing about Bassett and Scherzer, and Bassett in particular, just because he's a little bit younger, that I think is so important to have around young players now. And maybe the Jays already got it. Maybe he already left his imprint on this group, and I'm being overly sentimental about it. But I think it is important to have those guys around that, especially now with the way that younger players are. It is, man. To have that veteran presence, those guys who will do anything to win at every single thing, I like it. And especially when you're winning. You're right. When it's losing, it can be more taxing and annoying to guys. But when you're winning, that's a great thing to have around.
And here's one other interesting thing about Bassett and Scherzer. I think that beyond, because when it's time, they dial it up. But they actually know, and I was really struck in spring training, like Scherzer would often repeat in spring training this year. He'd be like, guys, it's spring training. Like, I don't know what to tell you. This is practice. Like, it doesn't count. Bassett, same thing. He'd be like, I don't know why you guys are even asking me questions. Like, this doesn't count. Like, I don't know how I can say this more clearly. It doesn't count. And so they are actually very good through their experience of throttling, knowing when to push and knowing when actually to conserve energy. And it's something, honestly, that I relate to when it comes to like pacing myself through the season, where it's like, you can't, as much as like every story matters, and like April the 5th and April the 15th, those stories matter too. It's like, you got to save something in the tank because, the team you cover might be in the World Series at the end of the year. And those guys are really good at that.
That's awesome. Okay, left out of this conversation. So, yeah, I mentioned the Bowden Francis thing. Like, all right, maybe he gets flipped. I'm not really too concerned about Bowden Francis. But, yeah, Eric Lauer had a really good year. And I don't know what his role is anymore. Like, if you've got 6 guys in front of him, he pitched well as a starter, and they didn't want to use him in leverage when it came to like left-handed batters, even though he did have success out of the bullpen. So are we sure Eric Lauer is a part of this baseball team moving forward?
I would think so.
Okay.
I have no reason to believe he's not. I think he's valuable depth as a starting pitcher, and I think that he can be good out of the bullpen too. And let's not forget too, Brendan Little, I think is an unknown, and the Jays aren't going to say this. I mean, Brendan Little went through enough that giving up that home run in Seattle, no one needs to be hard on him from inside that team. They're going to protect him as they should. But looking at it, you and I can tell they lost trust in him. And after that home run that he allowed in Seattle, they didn't go to him in leverage until it was the very, 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 very end of that 18th inning game when essentially literally no one else.
They had to.
Yeah, they had to. No one else was left in the bullpen. So they lost trust in Brendan Little. Where does that lead? I don't know. I mean, do they need to add another lefty? I would almost be inclined to add another lefty before I think about moving off Eric Lauer. Like, I think Lauer is an important part of this.
Okay, so then that brings us to the relief market. There's a lot of Fairbanks buzz. You're not feeling that because, Devin Williams came off the board. That was someone that people had linked to the Blue Jays. And I thought that he got paid a little bit more than I thought he was going to.
Yep.
And then, I know Iglesias was early, but nobody really cared about that one. Who's the other guy I'm missing right now? Helsley. Helsley goes to the Orioles. No, Maton, whatever. Maton, fine, whatever. I think that it was more so the idea when we were talking about pitching is that the Blue Jays wanted to add somebody who could at least compete with Jeff Hoffman for the closing role. That it wasn't a lock-it-down certainty that Jeff Hoffman would be the closer, and a lot of that was based on the results, but also the end-of-season media conference where Ross Atkins didn't say, hey, this guy's our closer next year. We have faith in him as the closer. It was the great thing about Jeff is he's not married to that. So what is the latest for you when it comes to the Blue Jays and the way that the relief market is playing out?
They want to add a reliever, and they have been doing their diligence, as you'd expect, on high leverage, late game relief types. And that includes some of the names that you mentioned. My personal opinion is that they don't have to be desperate here. They can wait. I don't think that they need to go out and spend $100 million on Edwin Diaz, for example. My impression is that their, position in that market publicly might be a bit overstated. Like, they're mentioned as like this front runner, like alongside the Mets, or I'm not. Like, I don't know that the Jays are necessarily on the brink of doing that. Like, maybe if things play out for 6 weeks and, he needs a home, like you could certainly see something happening because the Jays are open-minded. But I personally believe the Jays are in a position where they can probably wait if they have to. But yeah, they want to add a reliever. And I expect that they'll add a traditional reliever. Could be a lefty, could be a righty. They can honestly use both. I mean, I see a case for adding two. I don't know if they're going to add two, but I do think they'll add at least one.
Yeah, you think they're going to do that via free agency now, though, or do you believe that it's becoming more likely that happens through trade?
Well, this is another reason I think the Jays could wait. And so when of course, like, I've seen the rumors linking them to Fairbanks, and I'm sure that they've expressed some level of interest there as a matter of course. But if you're the Jays, I'm not saying it's a high % chance, but there is at least some chance that you end up getting serious with Kyle Tucker. And so if that were to happen, then you're probably trading Nathan Lucas. We talked about this last week. So, okay, if that's the case, you might be getting a reliever back. Maybe you're doing it that way. Now, not to say you couldn't add two relievers, but I just think there's some big pieces that still have yet to fall this offseason. And there are always, every single offseason, as you know, JD, there are always relievers out there on January the 20th, and good ones. And it's so unpredictable. It's such a small sample that I don't know that you necessarily have to go super hyper extend yourself on December the 3rd when there are going to be options out there in 2 months.
Yeah, I just think it feels more like, and Ennis used this analogy the other day, but it's right. When you're watching a draft and there's a run on a position, you start to tighten up and go, we should probably act now because if we get to the next round, we might not be able to get what we want. And that's the way that it feels with relief pitching to me anyways when it comes to the tiers. Is yes, there's the Suarez-Diaz tier, but the one that's right underneath it feels like Fairbanks is the only guy left in it.
And what I would say to that is, all right,
sure.
Yeah. That's put it this way. If I was an agent for a relief pitcher, I would be trying to create that perception, and I would love that perception. I would want that urgency from teams, and I would want them to think like, act now, this is your chance, get in there. And I would toss out, hey, Jays are in, Jays might be, and that's only one part of it. And it's not false because the Jays do their diligence, but all that to say, The point I'm trying to make here is I think the Jays can be flexible, and I think they can be patient when it comes to relief pitching. I don't think they have to be desperate here.
Well, it's the better place to not be desperate. And what I would say in terms of when people are seeing the Diaz stuff, right? If you're the agent for Diaz, you need the perception that the Blue Jays are hovering around and in on him, because the amount of teams that are going to be willing to spend big bucks, beaucoup bucks on a relief pitcher is minuscule. So if you remove the Jays from that conversation, it really hurts your leverage. So I don't look at those ones. And no offense, I'm not saying that these insiders aren't hearing from places that the Jays are somewhat involved or interested, but that one does feel to me more like the Jays are the boogeyman that no one really knows because they're the new kid in town with the big kind of spending and they could do anything, and watch out for them. Okay, but we got to get to the Tucker Bow stuff because you had thoughts you wanted to share. So I'm waiting. What's the latest for you with those two guys?
So the latest is, this will be kind of anticlimactic, but the latest is I think on Tucker it's going to take a bit. Like I don't think that he's on the brink of making a decision based on the conversations that I've had. So that means, typically with a free agent this big, there are meetings that take place, as you know, with teams. And we all know Tucker's from Tampa. He went to high school a few miles south of where the Yankees train. That's also really close to where the Blue Jays train. Stands to reason those two teams are probably going to invite Kyle Tucker. And I'm not reporting this, but stands to reason they're probably going to invite Kyle Tucker for a visit. John Schneider lives right there. Come on over, meet the manager, have a tour. That would, as a speculation, that would be a logical thing for the Blue Jays to do and a logical thing for the Yankees to do. That takes some time. And I'm not under the impression that anything is close on Tucker. And then by extension, that might mean that Bo has to wait as well, because a lot of the teams that are going to be in on Tucker are probably going to be in on Bo. So I could see it unfolding that way, where we have to be a little bit more patient. Although, obviously there's been a lot of activity already for the Jays. But I think from here, the Tucker stuff might take a little bit to play out.
Ben Nicholson-Smith, again, on an insane heater, has hit everything. So I'm going to buy what you're selling there when it comes to those two guys. Thanks for making time, buddy. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks, JD.
Yeah, Ben Nicholson-Smith, again, senior Jays reporter and writer for Sportsnet. Awesome guy, and a ton of good information there. All right, it's time. Who wants to win a bunch of cash while doing the best thing this holiday season? Sportsnet 590 The Fan is all in supporting the 50-50 Fortune for Sick Kids. It's a 50-50, so the more money we raise, the more kids we can help, and the more holiday cash you can win. The current take-home prize is guaranteed to be $214,000. That's pretty good. And again, helping an amazing cause. Buy your tickets at 50-50 Fortune or text the word money to 590-590 and we'll send the link right to your phone. 18 plus, please play responsibly. Standard message and data rates apply. Lottery license RAF 1518410. Quick break, hit what we missed. All right, Armin, what we missed?
We woke up this morning to the Los Angeles Clippers waiving Chris Paul last night, 3 a.m. Eastern time. I just saw a tidbit on this that I want to add in here, JD. Lou Williams, former Raptor, on the Run It Back show, says he heard from people in the Clippers organization that Chris Paul was very critical of the players, coaches, and front office, and the front office had enough of his criticism. Take that at face value. I'm not sure, but were you shocked at this? Is there any defense for the Clippers doing this?
This is so embarrassing for an organization that is already, if not the most embarrassing organization in professional sports. The Clippers might hand over what could end up straight up being the first overall pick in this year's draft to the Oklahoma City Thunder and completely eviscerate the competitive balance of the NBA. They gave up Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They gave up a bunch of different picks. And Kawhi Leonard has been a disaster. But beyond that, they're the only franchise that Jerry West touched that stayed who they are. Memphis had grit and grind, and there were real moments with them, with Jerry West. Obviously, what he did with the Lakers. Obviously, what he did with Golden State. But not even the great Jerry West could change any of the optics or culture around the Los Angeles Clippers. I grew up, they were a joke. They were embarrassing. They were the basketball card that you collected. You got a Danny Manning, and you went, yeah, I'm good. I don't really need anything on the Clippers page. Obviously, going back with Donald Sterling, and then they had hoped that things would change for that organization with Steve Ballmer, and it's a disaster. Like, it's salt the earth time with that team. Steve Ballmer should I don't even really want them to move to Seattle because they're so cursed that I feel like if they move to become the new Supersonics, that the stink would follow them from LA to Seattle. But yeah, they're fully back. Remember, they wanted to be like rivals with the Lakers in terms of who was going to run this city, who was going to be the team of the market. Hey, Clipper Darrell, get excited. Billy
Kawhi,
Crystal,
king of the LA commercials.
Yeah, it's over there. Chris Paul, who's a greater Clipper? Like,
the only one is Blake Griffin that could compete.
Who they also torched the relationship with, by the way.
Yep. Gave him a mock jersey retirement.
Yeah.
2 weeks before trading
Chris
him
Paul
to Detroit.
is the most famous Clipper ever, maybe the most accomplished Clipper ever.
Mm-hmm.
And they just destroyed that relationship with him during the last year of his career. Why? Because Chris Paul's a basketball genius. Buddy, is he an annoying guy to be around? This goes to the culture that we were just talking about with BNS yeah, man, when OKC is ahead of their trajectory and you've got Chris Paul and he's buying in, you're going to feel great. If your team sucks and you've got Chris Paul around and he's not one of the best 10 point guards on the planet or during his prime, the best point guard on the planet, sure, is it harder to have? Like, no doubt about it. You think Chris Paul's criticisms were incorrect? You think that his read of the situation was probably incorrect? Instead of taking what he had to say and trying to maybe apply some of it, this front office, which gets every bit of what they deserve for the way they handled the Kawhi Leonard situation and the arrogance of that organization when they started to splash the money around, they act this way. I don't have all the details, but here's the thing. When you have the track record of the Los Angeles Clippers, you don't get the benefit of the doubt in this situation. You are losers. The stink of the Clippers will never leave this organization. They were always losers, and they will always be losers. They are, if you want to do cursed franchise rankings, it's not the Leafs, it's not the Browns, it's not the New York Jets, it's the Los Angeles Clippers. There's no fan you would least want to be a fan of than the Los Angeles Clippers. And now to do this to, again, the greatest player. Imagine any other team doing this to one of the pillars of a loser franchise. Like, this is beyond embarrassing. And so, yeah, I'm actually thankful that Chris Paul will go get an opportunity to sign somewhere else. I don't know who's going to take him on, but I would guess that a winning team is going to say, yeah, like, we'll take Chris Paul for no money. This is how old is Chris? 41, 40?
I don't think he's touched the 40 yet, or he just did. He might have just.
He's the very youngest.
40. He turned 40 this year.
Yeah, he's 40. I was going to say, there's no way he's not 40. So it's not like teams are going to be champing at the bit to try to get Chris Paul, but there will be a situation for him. And I'm glad it doesn't need to end with the Clippers. And this is just a damn shame.
It's ending so sad.
It's a shame. That's sad. That's embarrassing for the Clippers. It's embarrassing for Ballmer. It's embarrassing for Lawrence Frank. And yeah, it's brutal for Chris Paul that he's going to now be man without country when it comes to teams that he has a home with in his post-playing career. Anyways, we'll see you tomorrow. Kevin Kiermaier.